Hello class, I am doing my best attempt to record a video for you on how to do drug calculations. So we are going to start with just some basic math on how to get from milligrams to milliliters when you want to administer a medication. So let's go through some sample problems here. The first one, administer 3 milligrams of Versed IV. Your concentration is 5 milligrams into 2 mLs. So we need to get the appropriate amount of medication from the 2 mLs to administer 5 milligrams. So this is a simple cross multiply and divide. So I'm going to start with what I have. I have 5 milligrams in 2 mLs. Then I'm going to look at what is it that I want. And what I want is to get 3 milligrams. And I haven't yet figured out the mLs, so I'm just going to put X mLs. So X is what I want. That's what I'm trying to figure out, how many milliliters to administer to this patient. So to get there, I am going to cross multiply and divide. Well, I'm going from milligrams to milliliters. So I'm going to take 3 times 2 and then divide it by 5. The other thing I want to make a note of is if I break this here down, I can figure out how many milligrams I have per milliliter, and that will always give me a check to make sure that my math is correct. So I have 5 milligrams in 2 mLs. That breaks down to 2.5 milligrams per ml. So now you can take out your calculator, and let's go with 6 divided by 5 would be 1.2. So therefore my answer is 1.2 milliliters, because I took 3, multiplied it times 2, and then divided that by 5. And I got 1.2 mLs. Now let's take succinylcholine. So I need to administer 164 milligrams of succinylcholine IV. My concentration is 200 milligrams per ml. Well, I also know that this is going to break down to 20 milligrams per milliliter. Now I'm going to take 164 milligrams of succinylcholine, and this is what what I want. This is what I want to give. So I'm going to put X mLs because I don't know how many milliliters I need, but I know what I do have is 200 milligrams over 10 mLs. Now here's where I can get rid of some zeros. If you imagine this line goes all the way through, I can always take out zeros from the top and zeros from the bottom. So here I have a 0 I can take out, here I have a 0 I can take out, and that makes it down to 20, and then I'm not doing as much math. So instead of taking 164 times 10 mLs and dividing it by 200, I know that 164 times 1 is 164, so I'm just taking 164 divided by 20. 164 divided by 20 is going to give me 8.2 mLs. And thinking about how I have 20 milligrams per ml, that math in my head would make sense, and I'm giving 8.2 mLs. So let's do one more, and then we're going to switch to some longer division. All right, I have 300 of amiodarone that I'm going to give IV. My concentration is 450 milligrams per ml. So I'm going to take the what I have. I have 450 milligrams per 1 ml. Make sure that you are writing your units. That is extremely important. And what do I want? So I want to give 300 milligrams, and I need to figure out how many milliliters that is. So that's going to be X ml. Remember, I'm looking for the X. So 300 times 1 is going to be 300. And then 300 divided by 450, that's going to give me 0.7 or 0.7 milliliters. And that makes sense because I have 450 total milligrams per milliliter, so I'm just going to give 0.7 of that. Okay, so there is step 1 for how to get simple concentrations down to their per milliliter, and how to get from milligrams to milliliters when we're administering a medication. Now, since we're on this page, it wouldn't hurt to briefly talk about up here how to get from pounds to kilograms. So let's even take like this patient here. They weigh 190 pounds, or actually let's start with an even easier one. Let's take this 220 pounds, because I know that if I want to go from pounds to kilos, to get from pounds to kilograms, I'm going to divide by 2.2. Or what I can do is take half, then remove 10%. So if I'm taking half of 220, you're on the right page here, I have 110. And then if I have half of 110, I want to remove, then remove 10%. Well, to get from 10% from 110, if you're using your calculator, you could just times it by 0.10, or I could just take my decimal place that would normally be behind the 0 on 110, and I can move it one spot, and that gives me 11. So I'm going to take 110 minus 11, and that will give me 99. So if you don't have the ability to just divide on your calculator the amount to get to 2.2 to get to kilograms, remember you can also cut it in half and then remove an additional 10%. And here we're talking about 99 pounds. Now I could just call it 100, you know, the 1 pound doesn't make a huge difference, but it is helpful to know that I have an easy shortcut way to figure out somebody's weight. Okay, so there's part 1 of Med Math, and now I'm going to close this, and if you're interested, you can check in on part 2, and we're going to do some long division and how to calculate drip rates. Welcome back. Let's get into how to do drip calculations. The first thing I want you to do is determine a formula that's going to work well for you when calculating out drip formulas. There are several out there, but find one, stick with one. I'm going to show you the one that I use, and hopefully this can be of some benefit to you. So if you go to the top of the screen up here, I'm going to circle this in red. Here's the calculation that I use, and this time, you know, could be under desired dose a little bit better, and so could milliliters, but you want to stick with 1. This is your what. So these are the things that you need to fill in with information, and that's typically how I set up each calculation. Is I need to put in the what is the information, what am I trying to get at, and what I'm getting at is always going to be my drip rate. So what should the drip rate be? Now you have a couple different drop sets, and at your departments there will always be different drop sets. You have to figure out which one's going to work best for you and what type of medication that you're giving. So let's start with this first one here, the nitroglycerin drip. So let's look at what I have. I know that I want to administer nitro at a rate of 20 micrograms per minute. I have a 10 drop, a 60 drop, a 500 cc bag of normal saline, and my nitro is supplied in 50 milligrams per 10 mLs. So here is all my information. Here is the what that I am going to put in to my calculation. So I actually like to even start my math problems by just making a line and an X, a line and an X, and a line, because I know I have to put information in each of these categories. So first, my volume. Well, my volume is 500 milliliters or 500 cc's, and because my calculation is going to be in milliliters, I'm going to change cc to milliliters. So I have 500 mLs, and that's what I have for my bag. I haven't gotten to the concentration yet of what I'm going to put in my bag. I just know that that's what I have for a bag. My desired dose is the 20 micrograms here per minute. So I need 20 micrograms in 1 minute. And then the last thing, I have my drip tubing, so here I'm going to use, I'm just going to say I'm going to pick the 10 drop, so my Gen 10 GTT tubing. And that's coming back to, you know, what is my drops per minute going to be. So up here, what I said, the admin setup is what we're getting at. I'm getting at how many drops per minute. That is what I want to figure out. Now we have to go into concentration. So here I know my nitro is supplied in 50 milligrams per 10 mLs. Well, one thing I want you to first make a note of, and I'll even put this in green, I have 50 milligrams, and I need to make sure that my units match. And here I want to give my nitro in 20 micrograms. So now I have a little bit of an extra math step here. I need to get my 50 milligrams into micrograms. And to get from milligram to microgram, I'm just going to add another 1,000. So for my concentration of what I'm going to put in my 500 bag of normal saline, if I put the entire thing in, I am putting in 50,000 micrograms. Micro is always going to be an extra 1,000, so remember micro 1,000. All right, now remember on the last video that you watched, I said if you think of this as being a giant line, and I'm going to do that for the sake of learning, in that line I can take off matching zeros from the top and from the bottom. I'm just going to put 1 ml here. Because the other thing is I need to make sure that I have matching units on the top and the bottom. So I have zeros that I can get rid of. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros on the bottom. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 on top. Perfect. So let's start crossing off some zeros. Take one out here, one here, 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 here. Last one on the bottom, last one on top. Well, that just makes your math incredibly easy, because now all I have to do is multiply 5. I'm going to use a different color here. I'm going to multiply 5 times 2 times 1. Well, 5 times 2 is 10. And on the bottom, I'm going to multiply this 5 times 1 times 1. And that gives me 5. 10 divided by 5 equals 2. So my answer is 2 drops per minute. Now looking back, I should have canceled out all of my units. So here I used milliliters, here I used milliliters, here I used micrograms, here I used micrograms, so that I'm left with drops per minute, giving me 2 drops per minute. Okay, let's go ahead and try another one. I'm going to scroll down a bit here to a place. Let's go to the very bottom. I have a little bit more space. Well, no, let's do dopamine. Then maybe we'll do that one over 10 minutes, because that would be a good one for time. Okay, dopamine. Administer dopamine at a rate of 8 micrograms per kilogram per minute. That's important to know, because now I have kilos here I need to think about. I have 2 different sets I can use, a 10 and a 60 drop set. Here I have a 500 cc bag, and my dopamine is supplied in 800 milligrams per 2 mLs. And here's my patient weight, which is also going to be important. All right, so step 1. I know that I have some units I need to change here. So I need to go from pounds to kilograms, and I need to go from milligrams to micrograms. So let's just make a separate spot for the weight. If I have 240 pounds, if I'm going to do this, I can just divide by 2.2. So if I want to divide by 2.2, that's going to give me 109. Or if I need to do this in my head, 240 divided, take that in half is only 120. And then 10% off of, or excuse me, 10% of 120. So if I have 120, I can move that end decimal point here, and then I'm taking 12. So 120 minus 12 is going to be 108. So anywhere from 108, 109, that's a 0. 108 is going to be my kilograms. All right, I'm running out a little bit of room, so I may have to write a bit smaller, but let's work out this problem. All right, my lines. So I have line X, line X, line equals. I have a 500 milliliter bag. I want to administer 8 micrograms per kilogram. Well, let's jump over here quick. I know that I have 108 kilograms, and I want to administer that 8 micrograms per kilogram. So I'm taking 108 times 8. 108 times 8 is going to give me 864. Let me just check to make sure I did that right. 108 times, okay, 864. And that was, I'm going to put micrograms per 1 minute. All right, and then last thing, let's go with the 10 drop tubing again. So if I'm using 10 drop, that's going to be in 1 minute. All right, now lastly, my concentration. I have 800 milligrams per 2 mLs, so I'm going to add that to my bag, a 500 cc bag. Now remember what I said, I'm adding 1,000, so I'm going to add 3 zeros. So I'm taking my 800 and I'm adding, comma there, those last 3 zeros. So you can barely see my comma right there. And now let's get some of those zeros out of there so we're not dealing with so many. And it looks like I have 3 on the top and 3 on the bottom I can get rid of. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There we go. It's like they never even happened. All right, now we got to do some math. So I have 864 times 5 is going to give me 4,320. And I'm going to divide that by 800 because that's what I have left on the bottom. And that's going to give me 5.4 drops per minute. All right, so here's my answer. For my, and I want to make a note, that's for the 10 drop tubing. If you're using 60 drop tubing, you're going to have a whole nother calculation there. All right, now lastly, let's go down to the amiodarone because that's over 10 minutes. All right, I have, let's go with start with my what again. I have amiodarone. I need to give 150 milligrams of this amiodarone. That's a really big. Let me make my pen point smaller. 150 milligrams over 10 minutes. I don't know why that's still so big, but try something here. And I have a 10 drop set and a 60 drop set. All right then. Technical difficulty, give me 1 second. That's still bigger than before, but we're just gonna work through it, I guess. Okay. All right. So I know that I have a 100 cc bag of fluid. So I'm going to start with my 100 mLs. My what, right? Line X, line X, line equals. I wanted to give 150 milligrams over 10 minutes. And actually this is only half of the problem. On page 2 it continues and it says that kind of the same as the amiodarone up above, I'll finish it, your amiodarone supply was 450 in 3 mLs. Alright, and I am going to use a 10 drop set. 10 drop 1 minute. So my concentration, because I have 450 in 3 mLs, I'm actually only going to put in 150 in my bag. That's kind of the little bit of the caveat here is just because you have 450 milligrams doesn't mean you have to put the full 450 in your concentration bag. If I only put 150 in, then I know that I'm going to be giving all of this 100 milliliters, and that's going to make my math a lot easier. So because I'm going from 450 down to 3 mLs, I need to figure out how much concentration I have per ml. Well, if I take 450 divided by 3, lo and behold, I have 150 milligrams per ml. Well, that's convenient because now I'm only going to put in 1 milliliter in my 100 cc bag. Therefore, I'm only going to put in 150 milligrams. Now, recall before I said you can take out zeros. I can also take out, full matching units and numbers. So notice here I have 150 on the top and 150 on the bottom. I can just take out the 150 and I can take out the 150. I also can take out the 10 and I can take out the 10. Well, that just leaves me with 100 mLs. Let me get a different color. I have 100 mLs over 1 minute. So my drop rate to give 150 micrograms of amiodarone in 10 minutes, I need to set my drip rate at 100 drops per minute. That's what I'm left with, because look at everything else has canceled out. And I put minute here. I was actually supposed to put milliliters, so I apologize for that. I may have done that with an earlier problem too. Your drop should always be 10 drops per milliliter. And I should fix that here, 10 drops per ml. Sorry, 100 drops per ml. Per minute. All right. Well, now that I screwed up the end of this video, and it's been 16 minutes, so I'm not going to change it. It is supposed to be milliliters here, but it's 10 drops a minute here. So remember that minute. My final correct answer, 100 drops per minute. I'm going to circle that. We all know it's correct. All right, I hope at least these longer calculations helped and showed you how to move decimal points, how to calculate weights, how to figure out strip rates. We have some other practice worksheets that you can utilize, and certainly if you have questions, contact your instructor.